Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and I had one of my longtime followers suggest that I do a video on go-arounds. And I thought that's actually a very excellent idea because go-arounds, at least in the airline business, are something we practice extensively, but we don't fly them the way we practice them. Now, that may seem strange. Why do we not fly something the way we practice it? Well, the most critical go around typically is one on an instrument approach where you're down to decision height, decision altitude, or alert height. So we're talking about, you're down to 200 feet, 100 feet, or even 50 feet. And for some reason, you need to go around. It can be tower, it can be an autopilot malfunction, because if you're doing a Cat 3 auto land and something goes wrong with the auto land, you no longer can land and you got to do a go around. And these are at the end of the flight when you're tired, you've been flying for 13, 16, maybe just 8 hours, but you're ready to get to the hotel, you're ready to get home, and you're light on fuel. So when you do a go around, this thing really performs. And like I said, we train for the most critical situation, which is going around on a missed approach because you're the lowest to the ground. But often go arounds, and I'm going to talk about a number of them here, often go arounds are from a situation that is not at the decision altitude, decision height on an instrument approach. In fact, usually you don't begin an approach until it's above minimums. It's required, and you cannot. So when you get to the point where you're going to land, you pretty much know that you're going to, unless the weather goes down. And I really can't remember in 36 years of airline flying where I ever made a go around on an instrument approach once I had started it. You usually come in and land. There probably was one, but I don't remember it. But let's talk about this go around because this is how we practice it. All right, so you're going to go around. So you announce going around, and for the 777, you're typically coming in flaps 30. So we go flaps 20. You push the toga go around, takeoff go around switches, and verify that the throttle's advance. Okay. Now, one thing you don't want to do that first push of the toga switch gives you a reduced thrust. Like I said, you're lightweight and you're really going to start climbing. So that second reduced thrust will still give you a good climb rate. But, sometimes pilots can get eager and they can hit that toga switch twice just to make sure they really hit it. Well, that sends you into full go around, and now you're really going for a ride because this airplane is lightweight, you're light on fuel, a lot of power, and you're really going to move. So you want to be aware of that because that can get you in a little bit of trouble. So you make sure you got positive rate based on the altimeter and the instantaneous vertical situation indicator. You call gear up. You set the missed approach altitude, and we do everything. You verify that the missed approach altitude is set. You select LNAV or heading select above 400 feet. At 800 feet, you can engage the autopilot. But what you do is instead of what would be a normal takeoff, where you're taking off rather shallowly and retracting the flaps on the speed schedule once you get to 1,000 feet or so, which is a normal procedure. You're dragging these 20 flaps all the way up to just about the missed approach altitude, and once you get there, you start leveling off. That's so you get terrain clearance and stuff. But when you're climbing out at that flap setting, you are really climbing. So it can be a handful. This thing happens fast. With a lot of power, and it can really be an eye-opener. So we practice those a lot. And in the airliner, in the simulator, we practice them a lot. But when you go out on the line, you really don't do that many. But the ones that you do end up doing can be quite interesting. And one of my first go-arounds that I experienced as an airline pilot, I was a 727 flight engineer, and I was based out of Cleveland. Yes, they invented the parking meter and the stoplight, I believe, and they had a few derogatory comments. While I was there, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire due to pollutants, and the firemen come up and they go, this made Johnny Carson, all this stuff. The fire department comes up, I digress, and they go, how do we put out, a fire on a river? We put water on it? Okay. That got a lot of night show talk humor fodder. Okay, back to the situation. So we're coming into Cleveland, and it is a dark and stormy night. Now, the picture you saw previously, that was a nice sunny day. No, it was a dark and stormy night. And we're coming on approach, and speed is very important. You're supposed to maintain your speed within 5 knots because they bring you in close. And that's one thing about flying, at the little airports where people have just super gaps and it takes forever to get off. And, I'm waiting for a guy, and you could get 3 airliners off in the time because the guy's too close. He's 2 miles on final. Oh, come on, give me a break. But I digress. But anyway, okay, it's really tight, but speed is important. And they put a guy in a Baron in front of us on the approach. And he decides to slow down to his approach speed quite a bit early. And so we are just eating him up. So, okay, they give us a go around. Fine, we go around. Okay, well, we come back around land, to land. We come back around, we get on the approach again, and we come in and we touch down. And just as we touch down, the captain takes the throttles there. Those are the thing in the just below the yellow arrow there. And he takes those and he pushes them full forward. And those little EPR gauges up there, we've got a go-around limit that the engineer is supposed to set. Well, the captain has his hands wired on these throttles, okay? And I mean, he's not moving them. And as the good, dutiful engineer, I say, overboosting. And he says, look. So both I and the co-pilot look up. And again, I don't have, if it was dark and stormy, you wouldn't be able to see the tail. He saw it enough. In American Airlines, okay, great airline, but it was a 727 that stopped with his tail over the runway. And we would have definitely had a metal on metal situation. So, boom, he goes firing it, and we go roaring over the top of this guy. And once he gets, I'm sure they probably heard us, and once he gets clear of that, then he allows me to set the go-around thrust. Well, that was it. He had done 2 attempts, and he says, we're going to our alternate, which was Pittsburgh. So we went from Cleveland over to Pittsburgh. One guy actually got off the airplane, and it wasn't, I'm pretty sure it wasn't because he lived in Pittsburgh. He had had enough of this. This was too much excitement. 2 go-arounds, and especially one that was rather harrowing and aggressive. So enough of that. He didn't like that much at all. Okay, we're doing a typical flight that I flew many times. We're going to Chicago to LAX, and we're coming into land, and the co-pilot is flying the aircraft, and we're coming in there, and we brief about the approach and the go around, and I mentioned to him. Okay, so the first go around I tell you about the one we did at Cleveland from just touching down. And they say once you deploy thrust reversers, don't go around because there was an accident I actually talk about on 737 where the reverser didn't restow. So once you deploy the thrust reversers, you're committed. But on the 27 when we had touched down, the captain hadn't gone into reverse, so we did a go around, which is the typical type of one that you train. But often the type of go-around is from farther out or from a higher altitude. And when the co-pilot briefed the approach, I cautioned him that, the go-around altitude is only 2,000 feet. So, if we go around, for any reason, just be aware of that. Don't necessarily hit toga. You can just push the throttles up manually, if we're a lot farther out. And funny thing that happened. We're coming into land, and we get sent around. Now, this picture, it's a lot closer to landing than we actually were. We were about almost 1,000 feet in the air when we got sent around due to a traffic conflict. And rightfully so, he just gracefully, pushed the throttles forward. We didn't, you don't need full takeoff, go around thrust, only climb 1,000 feet. So he was gentle with it. We climbed, we got the thing cleared up. Now, as you notice here, there's a lot of, see those double arrows, there's a lot of airspace around LA. Southern California is crowded. It's some of the most crowded airspace there is other than Florida. And I've flown my light twin in both of these places and, of course, the airliners. But if you're flying in there as a little airplane, it's a very busy place, and you don't get the type of handling you do, of course, if you're an airliner. But there's a lot of various routes that go across the airport. You've got routes that the one that's just west of the airport, 55 to 6,500 feet. Okay, that's fine. And you actually can go right over the top of the airport at 2,500 feet, which is kind of interesting. And I one time in my little airplane went over Atlanta, and I've done it to O'Hare too, over the top, which is really kind of cool. But the other issue is, and with all these little airplanes, it can be interesting from their perspective. A little airplane going through this corridor. Now, on the LA departure, and these departures, this is the LA one, it'll go up to about 10 and recycle. We had the Chicago, and I've gone through a full cycle of Chicago 1, 2, 3, 1 up to 10, then it recycles and starts back around. But when you're going off to the west, which is a very typical departure due to the prevailing winds, you have off the Santa Monica VOR there, the 160-degree radial, you've got a 3,000-foot altitude restriction, and that's for the VFR corridor. But it's kind of interesting for the airplanes flying through there, because still you've got a very good climb rate. Your nose is high. You're coming up, and if you happen to coincidentally have a little airplane that is flying through that airspace and he's looking down at you, you can offer a very scary picture. And I knew a very experienced test pilot, Cal. He was one of the founding members of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. He was an A4 test pilot, spent a lot of time out at Los Angeles. And he was going by, and he saw this airliner just coming at him like this, not realizing that he was going to, adhere, at least hopefully, to this restriction, the crossing restriction, and he started to pull up. Well, it's one of these things. Give us a call when you land. We want to talk to you. All right, well, let me talk to you about another situation that is kind of interesting here. I was coming in to Dulles National, IAD, and landing to the south, and they've got a very interesting missed approach here. You climbed 800 feet, left turn 3,000, and you do a 180-degree turn, as you can see on the yellow arrow there. And that's a very interesting go around. Now the word is that when you do a go around, they'll typically immediately give you go around instructions, because they don't want you flying the published, because that usually will just ball things up. But they have to have a published in there, and it has to avoid other airplanes and things like this, supposedly. But one thing that the controllers really don't want you to do is making a 180-degree turn, heading directly back into the oncoming traffic. So they gave us this go around. It was about 500 feet or so. I was coming into land. There was a commuter aircraft in front of us, and like I said, all of this is really well choreographed. I mean, the guys usually, we don't have a whole bunch of time from when they clear to when we come in and land. It's just tight because you're trying, to get the traffic moving. The problem isn't congested airways. It's the runway. There isn't enough runway space because you got to have a certain spacing. So that's where everything kind of comes together, is the time, to get your slot landing on the runway. It's a big sky. You can spread out all over the place. When you come into land, that's when it gets tight. So coming into land, and this guy starts to exit, and all of a sudden he stops. Well, it turned out that he blew a tire, and so he just stops. Well, he stops half on the runway. Well, that's not good. And they give us a go around. I'm at about 500 feet, so I start going around. And as I'm going around, no, this wasn't me. I kept all the wheels together, but I thought this was kind of a fun picture. But as I'm doing the go around, the controller doesn't say anything. And he was probably a new controller. And so I just keyed the mic and I said, "You got instructions for me, or you want me to fly the published mist?" And he comes back immediately, no, maintain runway heading, climb and maintain 3,000, something like that. So he would have not been happy if I started yanking that thing around. Well, I'll tell you one more go-around story that was kind of funny, and this was one that you almost could see coming. I am going into London Heathrow. I'm following a British Airways 747. Who knew, going into London Heathrow, that you'd have British Airways 747s? But anyway, I'm coming into land, and I'm coming here where the green arrow there is 27 left, and I'm following him, and there's a 400-foot overcast, and I watch him go, and I see the 747 descend into the overcast there, and of course he disappears, and you see little swirls and stuff, and I'm coming in behind him. And Tower, for some reason, I think our spacing was good. I don't know, but for some reason, Tower said expedite clearing the runway. And okay, they acknowledged. And then just a few seconds later, I heard the radio call, kind of a sheepish. I think we may have blown a tire. Okay, well, you know where this is going. They give me a go around, boom, we go, and of course, then we head on over to the other runway to land. And anyway, and then we have the long ride because of traffic in London. The long ride in. Anyway, those are a couple of go around stories. I hope you find it interesting and informative. Thanks for watching.